LG has published its finalized list of TVs that will support 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision gaming, and it's official. The LG C9 won't be getting a firmware to enable 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision gaming, and so it can only play Dolby Vision games at 4K 60Hz. Now, I know some of you LG C9 owners will be quite disappointed, will be frustrated. Some of you are going to be even quite angry. But I have gone to the trouble of getting in an LG C9 which is installed with the launch firmware version 3.50.7, and it is the exact firmware that is installed on the TV when it was first released back in April 2019. And I'm going to compare it to the current public firmware of 5.10.25, and then hopefully I can show you how much LG has actually done to add features and functionalities to this really quite amazing television. So feature number one, that is the most important in my opinion, would be HGIG. So if you look at this LG C9 with the initial launch firmware of 3.50.7, it didn't actually have HGIG in the HDR game mode at all. If you go into the dynamic tone mapping submenu, you only have an on-off toggle. So on will enable dynamic tone mapping, off will disable dynamic tone mapping. And this is problematic when you are trying to set various HGIG parameters in game consoles such as the Xbox Series X. If we set dynamic tone mapping to off, the TV will still be applying some tone mapping, and it will try to resolve even up to 10,000 nits, because this test pattern on the Xbox Series X goes all the way up to 10,000 nits. And therefore, when I try to set the max TML or maximum tone map luminance parameter here, I needed to go all the way up to 3000 nits. And if I enable dynamic tone mapping, the situation is even worse, because the dynamic tone mapping will look at this whole scene and tone map on the fly. And therefore, I found that I needed to go even higher, up to 4000 nits. But let's disable dynamic tone mapping and settle at a max TML and also maximum full frame luminance or max FFTML of 3000 nits. And then I'm going to start Dirt5, which is an HGIG compliant game. And once I get into the game, you can immediately see that the max TML and max FFTML values of 3000 nits is just blowing out the specular highlight detail, in terms of the sun and the clouds in the sky, and also the reflections of the sun off the water, and also the brighter portions of the roof. They are all blown out with a quite washed out appearance to the entire HDR image. And if we compare it to the current public firmware of 5.10.25 for the LG C9, the third option has been added. So over the years, at some point, LG has added an HGIG option. What this HGIG setting does is to provide a hard clip. This means that the console can perform all the tone mapping, so you actually avoid double tone mapping. So if we use this HDR calibration screen from the Xbox Series X, you can see that once I enable HGIG, the tone mapping on the TV is disabled, and therefore it hard clips at 800 nits, and I needed to only go up to 800 nits for both the max TML and also the max FFTML. And once we accepted these new parameters of 800 nits and go into Dirt5 again, you can see that the image just retains so much HDR impact because of the depth that is imparted by not having too high a max TML or max FFTML. It retains all the specular highlight detail in the sky and also the reflections on the water and in other brighter portions of the screen as well. So HGIG, in my opinion, is a very important parameter, and LG has done very well to bring it to the LG C9. And the second functionality that they have added over the years is definitely 4K 120Hz. So if you look at the launch firmware of 3.50.7, you can see that if I go into the Xbox information screen, the TV doesn't even support 4K 120Hz, because when the LG C9 was launched back in April 2019, the Xbox Series X wasn't even available yet. There was actually no HDMI 2.1 source that is capable of even outputting 4K 120Hz yet. So the Xbox Series X was launched in November 2020, and if I use a GeForce RTX 3090 and I try to enable 4K 120Hz, again you can see that it is not listed as one of the options under PC, which means that the HDMI 2.1 transmission method of fixed rate link isn't even enabled on the LG C9 at launch. But somewhere along the way between April 2019 and now, LG has seen fit to issue a firmware update to add 4K 120Hz capability. So that is certainly the second feature that is very important that has been added to the LG C9. And the third feature is G-Sync compatibility in terms of the VRR. When we used the RTX 3090 to send out a 4K 60Hz video signal to the LG C9, which is carrying the launch firmware of 3.50.7, you can see that even though G-Sync can be enabled, there is visible stuttering and also tearing. And if I pull up the test pattern here, which is a vertical bar scrolling horizontally, you can probably see the tearing more clearly. The RTX 30 series card is released in September 2020, which means that there is a gap of 18 months from the launch of the LG C9 to the release of the RTX 30 series card. LG still saw fit to issue a firmware update to enable G-Sync VRR and to let people play games in 4K 120Hz VRR with G-Sync. And that is already a commitment on their part, and I don't think it is easy trying to come up with these firmware updates to add these functionalities. And functionality number 4 is AirPlay functionality. If we look at the LG C9 on its launch firmware of 3.50.7, there is no AirPlay functionality in the connections bar. But if we look at an LG C9 today with the latest firmware of 5.10.25 installed, you can use AirPlay on the TV, which means that somewhere along the way, LG has actually added not only AirPlay but also the Apple TV app to the LG C9, again bringing more functionality to the TV, even though they have no obligation to do so. And last but not least, the one functionality that I want to cover in this video is Disney Plus and also to a lesser extent the Apple TV app. And the reason why I say that is because the LG C9 was launched back in April 2019. The Disney Plus app was launched I think in November 2019. So again, they had no obligation to add that. And I can only remind you of what Panasonic TV owners have to go through. So Panasonic TV owners this year in 2021, only now they are actually getting the Disney Plus app. Almost 2 years down the line, they are only getting it now. And it is still missing some Atmos related features as well. So from that point of view, I think LG has done quite well to add Disney Plus and also Apple TV app to the LG C9. And on the launch firmware of 3.50.7, if we try to install Disney Plus, it is not even allowing us to install, and it is asking us to actually update the firmware of the TV, which means that this functionality comes much later. And somewhere along the line, LG has added Disney Plus and also the Apple TV app to the LG C9. And in case some of you are wondering whether this is just because most apps are updated in the later form and they require the latest version anyway, I'm going to show you that on the launch firmware, Amazon Prime Video wasn't installed, but if I actually press install, it is actually allowing me to install it, which means that the Disney Plus and also the Apple TV app functionalities are added through a later firmware update. Because again, I don't think LG is under any obligation to add those. So when you consider all things, the fact that LG hasn't actually added 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision gaming support, and this is already 30 months down the line, from launch. Remember, the LG C9 was launched back in April 2019, and now we're in October 2021. That's like 2.5 years. That's 30 months down the line. And when was the first time we first heard about 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision? The earliest indication we had that this was indeed a feature on the Xbox Series X was when some members in the Alpha Ring got a notification in the Xbox Series X information screen that their TVs are not compatible with 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision gaming. And that was back in March, April this year. So I don't think it is fair to expect a manufacturer to support something 2 years down the line that they didn't already know was going to happen in the first instance. So the way I see it is, when you bought the LG C9, nowhere it is stated that, the TV will support 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision. And at this moment in time, I have explained in my previous video that perhaps it is due to hardware reasons, or perhaps it is due to resources reasons, that LG probably won't be supporting the C9. And indeed, my prediction came true. But you have to understand that the C9 generally has a different hardware architecture to the C10 and also the C1. And I have shown it very clearly in this chart that I made in my previous video. So we are not even entirely sure whether the hardware that is on the C9 is capable of supporting 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision in the first place, because they needed an additional HDMI switch chip to add to the original 018 HDMI 2.0 chip to enable HDMI 2.1 functionality. So from that point of view, the hardware architecture is different, and we are not even sure whether the hardware can support Dolby Vision. Who knows, if LG decided to go gung-ho and try to add Dolby Vision support to the LG C9, and then they managed to do it, but the gameplay in 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision is so posterized with wrong colors. What do you say? People like me will just criticize them, and they would have wasted their effort when the engineers could have been working on next year's models, let's say the C2, or maybe troubleshooting some of the problems with the LG C1. So I think it is a no-win situation for LG, but hopefully from the point of view of you LG C9 owners, hopefully you can understand how good you've had it with the C9. Let's say LG worked really hard and pull all their resources to enable 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision gaming on the LG C9. Then next year, Samsung will probably launch something with HDR10 plus gaming, and will you start demanding that the LG C9 start supporting HDR10 plus gaming then? And the question we have to ask ourselves is, where does it stop? Where do you draw the line of adding features to a TV that's out of production? And I think that through these features that LG has added on the C9 over its lifetime, HDIG, G-Sync VRR, 4K 120Hz, AirPlay support, and also Disney Plus, and also Apple TV, not to mention eARC, multi-channel LPCM support, which I haven't demonstrated in this video. I think, LG has done its bit. At the end of the day, the LG C9 is still one of the best TVs that you can own today. I mean, it's got 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, and not many TVs can claim to have that. And its HDMI 2.1 ports support the full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth of 48 gigabits per second. And it's got OLED picture quality, it's got many of the gaming features, and I just laughed when one of you said that you will bin the C9 because it is not getting 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision gaming support. And I think that it is a bit premature. And trust me, I do know something about being premature. I think that, even though you can't play games in 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision format, you can still play in 4K 120Hz HDR10, and especially with the HDIG support on the LG C9, you can disable the tone mapping on the TV and ask the display mapper or the tone mapper on the game engine to output a correct level for your TV. It is akin to having Dolby Vision for that game. And obviously Dolby Vision has its advantages, and there is only one particular scenario that I can think of where Dolby Vision gaming is definitely superior, and you can find out what it is in my Dolby Vision versus HDR10 gaming side-by-side comparison video here.